for a video on attachment trauma or how to work with attachment trauma. And I actually have a video. I did a video on that about a year ago, but it's tricky to find because it was done in this Inner Child Adult series that I did back then. So I'm going to just sort of simply replay the video here because thinking about attachment trauma and working on it is very, very helpful because our families really model sort of a very, specifically our parents, if you grew up in childhood trauma, kind of a really kind of horrific blueprint about what intimacy and secure attachment is. And it's very powerful to really take a deep look at it and to really think about how we have our own attachment style and how we can actually do some work around that. So all of that is going to be explained in the following video, which I'll play in just a second. But before, if you're a therapist or a life coach or anybody working in the healing arts or a holistic practitioner, coming up on Saturday, March 5th, 2022, I'm offering a childhood trauma training. It's a 4-hour training that goes through all my specific tools on how to work beyond just being trauma informed and how to help clients take a deeper dive into their family system and become more comfortable talking about it using these very specific tools. I would love to see you there, and you can just click on the white kind of bubble up here to get more information on registration. So without further ado, here is how to work on attachment trauma. And at the end, I've added some journal prompts that you can get into at the end of the video that I'll explain. The adult inner child work that I do is designed to help the abuse survivor connect and fix the attachment wound that they have in a good enough way. We've all heard the annoying phrase, "You gotta love yourself first, man." And by now, it's a vague cliche statement that people make, whether in recovery culture or whatever. And it's kind of annoying. And what is annoying about it is that no one explains how that's done. It's just more of a command to go do that. I'll do my best, and I hope that the takeaway from this video is to get you guys to have a game plan about some concrete steps about moving towards self-love. It's not just like, poof, you got a haircut, and now you're like sort of like you have some self-love going on. It's a process. As a childhood trauma therapist, I'd say that 99% of us, essentially all of us, is that we try to fix our childhood wounds through a romantic partner, whether that's trying to get somebody who was really shut down to awaken or to try to get somebody to see us in a certain way. I really feel like that's what these inner children are sort of doing, and there's no adult present to stop that process. This is why things get really stuck and really mucky in our relationships. We want a partner, but we're actually sort of fighting with our parents and fighting through our childhood stuff through that partner. So let's dive in. There are 4 major attachment styles. And it's helpful to figure out what is primarily your major romantic attachment style before we can figure out, like, how does that apply to our inner child. So usually, the 4 attachment styles are explained on an XY axis with the 2 variables on that axis being avoidance and anxiety. There are other really cool ways to explain attachment, like sort of trust and low self-esteem, but I really like these 2 because they are sort of adult and inner child centric. So here is a super overly simplified rundown of the 4 attachment styles. So out of the 4 styles, the first is secure attachment, and it's obviously sort of the ideal goal for us to be moving towards too in a good enough way. The securely attached person means that there is low anxiety and low avoidance. It doesn't mean that everything in the relationship is perfect for them, but the secure person or the secure couple has the ease and the skills and the personal safety to fix and repair conflict and roll with stuff that comes up in every relationship. So that is secure. The next is something called anxious preoccupied. It is low avoidance and high anxiety. Anxious preoccupied people want the relationship, but they are often acting out in the relationship, feeling like they will lose the partner at any given time. This style is known to be needy. Their neediness comes from needing to prove their worth and prevent the loss of the partner, or they need constant confirmation from that partner that they're going to stay. And even when they get that reassurance, it doesn't last due to the childhood trauma belief system. They make themselves uncomfortable by being hypervigilant about how things are going in the relationship. And in a relationship, they can really idolize their partner and diminish themselves. So that is anxious preoccupied. Next is the attachment style of dismissive avoidant. They have low anxiety and they are okay with themselves, but they have high avoidance. These folks are fine being alone, and they can, easily throw relationships away. Dismissive avoidant people aren't really attached enough, and they can move between relationships with ease because they're fiercely independent and they tend to not value relationships so much. They can be super casual about connecting, they can be aloof, they can be indifferent, and they can be shut down. And in a relationship, they often behave like they have one foot out the door, whether that's known to their partner or not. So next up is fearful avoidant. Fearful avoidant is high anxiety, high avoidance. They want to be in a relationship, but they're highly comfortable being in one, and they tend to act out from a place of criticism, followed by fearing abandonment. There is this vibe of like, I love you, I hate you, and that in this attachment style creates a lot of chaos and a lot of turbulence. They may not really believe in trust or love, but they can't stand being alone. You can see that as kind of like a huge conflict. And in a relationship, they can be very hot or cold, which creates some chaos. So in an overly simplified view, guys, I tend to look at attachment as combinations of people who are runners and who are chasers. Anxious, preoccupied people chase their partner. There's that neediness. Dismissive, avoidant people, they run from intimacy because they're independent and they're pretty much not experiencing the full range of emotions, so they're out of there. And the fearful avoidant is a combination of both running and then chasing, which creates that sort of chaos. Two side notes here. These styles can be known as different names, such as fearful avoidant is also known as disorganized attachment. It might get confusing if you sort of jump in and try to do, I would recommend this, to do some research on your own and read more up about it. I'm giving a very overly simplified version of this stuff. But just know they have different names. So that can be a little bit of a bump in the road. The second side note is that people can be paired with the same attachment style or your opposite. For example, I find trauma survivors, they can be often paired with a runner and a chaser, but there's no hard and fast rule to that stuff. I've had couples who are both sort of like anxious, preoccupied, and that's kind of a mess because they're both constantly questioning how the other one's doing. Hopefully that makes sense. So there's lots of videos and literature that you guys can dive into to help you make more sense of your romantic style and maybe your partners, and to look for your personal patterns of relationships. But in this video, the takeaway is I want you to be thinking about, like, what is the quality of your attachment with yourself? How do you treat yourself and how do you feel about yourself? And I'm trying to get people to look inward and connect with themselves as opposed to trying to sort of get their needs met from such external sources, or not have it all be that, is what I'm trying to say. Let's come back to the axis of that infographic about avoidance and anxiety. Remember those two variables. This is why I like it, because these two variables, they're adult and inner child centric in my mind. Avoidance is a behavior, which is something that the adult part of us actually has control over. Meaning if we get our adult in shape, our adult has the capacity to have self-control over how much we avoid ourselves, how much we avoid our own issues and our own emotions, as opposed to just like sort of acting out unconsciously. What that looks like if we did have control, it means we wouldn't act out in a relationship. We would spend more time learning to control our emotions and not avoiding ourselves. And we would, most importantly, set personal boundaries, self-boundaries, like, we're not going to continue to date unavailable people because it's me and you, kid. We're not going to continue to try to like get our partner to see us as good because you need that from me. Those kinds of ideas. The avoidance here isn't about avoiding connection with a partner. The avoidance is how I'm framing it, is that the person no longer tries to avoid themselves and their inner child. That's the name of the game. Let's focus on how we disregard ourselves unconsciously and unconsciously act out from a place of the inner child's anxiety. The other variable, the anxiety on that axis, is simply the inner child's emotional memory system from childhood. And those vibes are beliefs such as love isn't real. I have to get people to stay. or I can't deal with this and I can't deal with you. You can see that each one of those statements is significant to one of the attachment styles. Which ones? Testing you guys a little bit. So I've broken down each of the three dysfunctional attachment styles from the perspective of getting our adult in place or having our adult have it together more on behalf of this kid and focusing on our inner child instead of trying to fix our relationships through our partners. So for anxious attachment, here are the reparenting tasks. The general vibe of anxious preoccupied is, are we okay? And the reparenting task is that first is the adult needs to buy into the strong tendency to project abandonment onto others, namely their partner. The second task is that the adult needs to establish consistent, loving dialogue with their inner child to help with their trauma beliefs. And the third is that the adult needs to practice setting healthy limits with our inner child about the tendency to project. The first suggestion of buying in really means to become painfully aware or painfully conscious of how the inner child acts out with others by projecting abandonment. This looks like, I can tell you're mad at me from your mood. It looks like putting the partner on a pedestal and diminishing ourselves. And it looks like ignoring flaws or ignoring issues that need to be brought up due to feeling that there's going to be abandonment if we do bring those up. Hopefully that makes sense. The dialoguing, that second suggestion, means to do the work of connecting with our inner child. I'll be doing more videos on this. I'm developing a dialoguing resource for my website in the future to help you guys with that. And for now, I placed a couple books in the description of this video that are excellent to learn how to do inner child dialoguing. Hands down, these are the best two that I know. The third suggestion is the personal boundary setting with our inner child. This looks like saying to our inner child, we're not going to avoid bringing up this hard thing with our partner. It looks like we're not going to constantly ask them if they're okay with us. It looks like we're going to slow this thing down and really see if this person is safe for us, because anxious preoccupied, they may have a tendency to rush and not really spend the time seeing if the person is safe or not. Okay, so lastly on this is the anxious preoccupied person tries to self-regulate through feeling okay with their partner or feeling that the relationship is okay, instead of self-regulating with their inner child and taking care of that inner child's emotional state. Okay, so let's move on to dismissive avoidant. Here are the reparenting tasks. Dismissive avoidant, the general vibe is, I don't need anything from anyone. It's a very independent vibe that the dismissive avoidant person has. The reparenting tasks are the adult needs to buy into valuing their emotions and valuing intimacy more. The second suggestion is the adult needs to establish consistent, loving dialogue with their inner child to help with their trauma history and help with their core beliefs. And lastly, the adult needs to seek and practice resources around reconnecting with repressed emotional spectrum and experience. I know that that's a mouthful, but I'll explain. The first suggestion of buying in really means to become conscious of how the inner child and the adult do not value relationships or the full range of their emotions. What this looks like, it looks like being shut down, looks like being somewhat numb or aloof in relationships. And it also means to really question their own value system of their independence. It's not exactly healthy or good for them to be that independent or not needing anybody. Usually keeps their world pretty small and not connected. And the adult loving dialogue and connection is the same for anxious preoccupied, and each of these styles needs to do that dialoguing footwork with themselves and reparent their amazing inner child. The third suggestion is getting help with opening up. And what that means is going to therapy with somebody who's safe, like a safe therapist, going to groups. The dismissive avoidant person had a great strategy in childhood, is to be really siloed and be really independent. And they're too self-sufficient, to be honest. The battery icon that I have in that infographic is there because this attachment style needs a jump start. It's like their battery is dead, and through therapy or learning about emotions or being with safe people is designed to get them to awaken. Hopefully that makes sense. The dismissive avoidant person tries to self-regulate through independence. and not feeling their full spectrum of emotions. That's the opposite from like learning how to be open and experiencing deeper emotions, which are for them really repressed and underground, and to self-regulate in a different way. Hopefully that makes sense. Lastly is the fearful avoidant attachment style. The general vibe of this attachment style is get away from me, wait, come back. I've got a roller coaster icon there because this is a very turbulent sort of attachment style, unfortunately. It's exhausting for the person and it's exhausting for the partner usually. And the reparenting tasks are the adult needs to buy into the strong tendency to create chaos or turbulence in order to create personal distance and safety. They're doing it for a reason. So in some of this stuff, it may seem judgy, you guys, but you guys are doing this stuff for a very specific, good reason. Adults need to establish consistent, loving dialogue with the inner child to help with their trauma history and their core beliefs. And the adult needs to seek and practice resources for emotional sobriety and regulation, and to also develop a filter. So the first task, like the others, is the buy-in, to really know that you're creating distance and turbulence as a way to keep yourself safe. This looks like criticism of self, criticism of your partner. There's sort of a you suck and I suck vibe to this attachment style. And I know it sounds like a paradox, but discomfort and distrust are more familiar to this attachment style than being emotionally sober and accepting and chill with your partner. There could be a lot of negative self-talk with this attachment style, fights in the head with their partner. It can look like the fearful avoidant person. It looks like they want to be in, but they need to control the parameters and the safety. And they are creating this push-pull environment in actually a very convincing sort of way. You know what I mean? It's like it's actually hard to know what's going on there during the present sort of upset. The second suggestion is, the adult loving dialogue is the same as the other two attachment styles. Each style needs to do the footwork of connecting with themselves and reparenting their amazing inner child to move forward. And the third suggestion is for the adult to learn about becoming emotionally sober. Unlike, say, the dismissive avoidant, the fearful avoidant person has too much emotion, where the dismissive avoidant doesn't really have enough. And they have too much relational chaos. This style needs help from therapy about grounding themselves, about cultivating self-safety and chill on behalf of their inner child, who kind of fuels the acting out. Some ideas is like therapy, some mindfulness work, some DBT-like skill sets, and protecting their partner from themselves by developing a filter. What that looks like is like, I feel like I want to sort of like either have a fight or disengage or whatever, and let's not sort of maybe provoke them in some way, and we'll take care of ourselves first. That's what I mean about a self-boundary. The fearful avoidant person might try to self-regulate through upset and conflict. I know that sounds ridiculous. I know that sounds like a paradox. But they do that instead of, the goal would be to embrace being loving and chill with their inner child so that maybe they don't need to act out. So, some closing thoughts. These three styles are on a scale for most people. You may identify with some of these qualities, but not all of them. You may identify with all and say like, oh my God, that's me, and you may have sort of more of an intense version of it, but it is on a scale. Not everyone checks off all the boxes for these attachment styles, so there is sort of severity to it. Hopefully that makes sense. The other is, and this might be a little bit more confusing, is that I think we all identify with the three aspects of these attachment styles through different relationships and different periods in our life. But we are looking for more of the patternized one that we tend to gravitate towards, and hopefully that's helpful. So I hope that this video was helpful to you guys. And I'll end with that sort of prayer statement from the other videos, which is, may you be filled with loving kindness. May you be well. May you be peaceful and at ease. May you be joyous. I wish you guys good luck. I hope that this video was helpful, and just more ideas about establishing and getting our adult in shape on behalf of the inner child to kind of move towards change. And lastly, I know I've said it before, this stuff is like, it's not like you get a haircut and then you see, poof, you're magically different. This took me years to move towards, but I needed to be in therapy. I needed to be chipping away at this stuff. So back to those journal prompts. If you got some pen and paper handy, here are some questions to get you thinking about your own attachment style, what your inner child believes about it, and that kind of a thing. The first prompt that I have is, what does your inner child believe about having real and safe intimacy from a partner? Does your inner child think it's possible? Why or why not specifically? We're looking at what are some fears or like deep entrenched core beliefs around kind of getting the intimacy that you want, and kind of really try to nail it down. The second one is, coming back to childhood, is what was modeled from your parents around secure attachment, like within how they parented, but more specifically about their relationship. Think of what style your parents were, thinking of the styles in the video, and how they did in terms of that X and Y axis around anxiety and avoidance. The third journal prompt is, when we're triggered around intimacy, when you're triggered around intimacy with sort of your dating or a partnership or your marriage or whatever, how do you behave when you're triggered? Do you kind of act aloof? Do you act from a place of needing a lot of reassurance in the relationship? Do you get really angry or disgusted around connecting? Or do you tend to act out and don't feel secure? And if so, how? And a behavior are things like that running and chasing thing like I mentioned in the video. And journal prompt number 4 is, what is something that we can commit to stopping something or starting something? Do you need to stop picking fights with your partner around security? Do you need to look for ways? Do you need to stop looking for the ways that your partner isn't safe when that may not be fair to them? Do you need to stop dating unavailable people in your dating life? Do you need to stop looking for somebody or looking for a relationship to rescue you as opposed to connecting with yourself? Do you need to stop thinking that your partner is going to leave or has a wandering eye or that kind of a thing, which may not be fair to them? And I know that all of that is a hard judgment call, depending on the partner. And can you replace those behaviors with a daily connecting or daily journaling with your inner child? Because that's really what I mean, sort of like fixing the relationship itself, is we really have to be much more connected with ourselves and rescue ourselves before we look for the partner or the relationship to do that for us. So I hope that those prompts were helpful to you, and I will see you next time.